we were in this call together, and so I'm super, super happy to see some familiar faces, and just excited to kind of give some updates. So I'm going to go ahead and share screen and begin my slides. How does that look on your end? Good, thumbs up, perfect. Again, so grateful to be here. Thank you so much for having me again. And it's just so amazing to see all of you. And I can't wait to, run through these slides and get to have a conversation again with you all. So this is really just going to be a quick and kind of all over the place presentation. I want to kind of give a brief on where I currently am and what has happened this summer that I've got to work with directly when it comes to embodied carbon, as well as providing some technical tools that come across my desk that I get to work with now a little more closely, and really do a call out on building reuse and deconstruction. I think that has become more and more of a topic in the space that I work in, at least, and something that I think advocates on the ground can really get more involved in. And then really looking forward to what we can do next steps strategically. I feel like this summer has been a bit of a disappointment when it comes to policy, but I think, addressing embodied carbon, it's feeling forward. We're learning as we're going, and we might not get there now, but we're going to get there soon. And so we just have to keep on building momentum. So where am I now? So since MCAN, I am now the program manager of policy and advocacy at the Boston Society of Architects, also known as the BSA or the Boston Society for Architecture. The BSA is a nonprofit membership organization committed to improving the quality of life for the Boston area residents by championing innovation in the built environment with an emphasis on equity and sustainability. So it really was a perfect fit for me to go into following all the work that I got to do at MCAN with all of you. And so my position is really to address local issues impacting our members in the cities and towns in Eastern Massachusetts, while also really collaborating with AIA Massachusetts on broader state matters. And as Fred said, I'm also a consultant for the Rocky Mountain Institute. And so this is to continue the work I started here at MCAN around the Massachusetts municipal cohort on embodied carbon policy. Rebecca Esau, who is a carbon net zero manager, and myself co-facilitate this cohort. And so it's a collective of over 30 municipal officials, which span from Amherst to Nantucket. So it's a pretty good range and region. And really its focus is on fostering collaboration, that regional collaboration that's necessary when introducing new policy at the city level. And so really focusing on that implementation work now. We did the series when I was at MCAN was more on education, and now we're looking more at focusing on what is it that these municipalities could actually move forward on. And so I would love for advocates to get more involved in this cohort. It is only for municipal officials, the meetings themselves, but there are toolkits that I know MCAN already has if your municipal official is not in this cohort, to get involved. Please reach out to them. And also, once you come across a project that your municipal official might not know about, to reach out to let them know that these projects are happening, that there's all these embodied carbon tools that they can use, which I will cover. And there's definitely going to be more opportunities for you to be more involved on the policy end, hopefully, once they become drafted. And so I definitely want to make sure that we stay in contact and we continue that work there. So to kind of rewind, I want to do some foundation setting so people kind of understand what is embodied carbon and why is it important. This is something I really got into at MCAN, did a lot of research. And so the best way for me to explain it, there's a definition here, and people use like from cradle to barrel, all these different terms to understand embodied carbon. But the way I like to explain it is it's the carbon in the walls when we're looking at the built environment. So we're so used to understanding operational carbon when you turn your stove on or when you flick your light on. But instead, now looking at it, instead of I'm using energy when I do that, was how did this light switch get here? Why is my stove in the corner of my kitchen? How did it get there? that carbon that was created when this building was being built. And then when you move out and someone buys your house, and they're like, oh, let's demolish this and build a whole new home. That carbon
Miranda, I'm
actually
sorry
moves
to
forward.
cut you off. Your slide is cutting off the leftmost side of it. I don't know if you're able to maybe scroll to the left or toggle full screen
Let me see, sorry.
or zoom out.
Is that better?
We are not seeing a change. Oh, yep, that is much
Okay.
better. Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, no, thank you for letting me know. Um, but yeah, so the carbon that's within the walls, the carbons that we create when the manufacturing, the transportation of the building materials, and then the removal of the building materials as well. That's kind of how I like to wrap my head around it. But there's many different ways that you can explain embodied carbon. Many people say it's not the sexiest term when it comes to talking about climate change. But it is critical. It is very, very important that we begin addressing embodied carbon. It accounts for between 11 to 23% of our global annual emissions. And it's something that here in Massachusetts, we are not taking the time to address. We are not being cautious and intentional. And so there has been a lot of improvement, but there's a lot of steps that we can take and we can be aggressive on. And so one of the reasons why we should be is all of these critical health components. Yes, and all carbon affects health. All emissions affect health. So really understanding when you're talking to your municipal official, when you're teaching someone about embodied carbon, they're like, I'm not involved. I'm not in the AEC community. How do I address this? There's so many ways that you can pull it back into the bigger picture of it all and realize, there's communities in the frontline communities where these materials are being manufactured. There's protections. These are the buildings that we live in, that we play in, that we work in, and that we spend majority of our time, and they need to be built safe and sustainable and resilient. And so there's so many steps that we can take here. And so that's just a little foundation setting there. So what happened this summer? So something to update: earlier this summer, the Boston Society for Architecture and the Carbon Leadership Forum, the Boston Northeast Hub, which were actually a really huge partner for me when I was at MCAN. They were the technical experts that I worked very closely with when it came to drafting legislation and working with the municipal officials. And I hope you all still stay in contact with them, because I still do. And they help me understand a lot of these huge technical terms when it comes to addressing embodied carbon. And so that's exactly what we did here at the Northeast Embodied Carbon Summit in 2024. And this summit actually marks 5 years since the BSA held their first Embodied Carbon in Buildings conference, which also led to the development of the CLF Boston Northeast Hub and their Embodied Carbon 101 series that's still on their website. And really, the goal of this summit was to come together to learn from each other, to provide resources to the broader AEC community, and to really advance their collective efforts of addressing embodied carbon. So we had over 250 attendees, ranging from municipal officials, architects, engineers, developers, and folks from across the Northeast, not just Massachusetts. So it was really awesome to connect with people outside of our little bubble. And so the first day was a series of 3 panels. They were ranging from policy and advocacy, where I had the pleasure to be a part of, and really touch on all of the work that I did here at MCAN and all of the ways architects can become advocates. And then really other panels were practice and innovation, and then ways to push forward. So really looking more at the technical project, um, different technical steps forward that they could address embodied carbon, which was a lot of information and kind of hard for me to understand. But it was really amazing to see that there's actual folks who are doing the work that are really committed to addressing these emissions. And then day 2 included a series of workshops, one of them being a municipal policy, where again, I had the honor to co-facilitate. And then one was on reuse and circularity, which is a new term that came across my desk. And then the Mass CEC and B Plus Embodied Carbon Challenge as well had a workshop, and also had the reception where they gave out the 11 winners to their Embodied Carbon Challenge. And so that was really amazing to see. It was a really wonderful time, and it was really kind of one of those moments where, as an advocate and from someone working at the policy level, I talk to these experts and they give me all these terms and they help me define all of these different ways, but I didn't know how they actually address it within their work. And so these folks are actually moving forward and they're trying to identify best practices. And so I do hopefully we'll be able to get all of the slides from this summit very soon and send them out to all the attendees, as well as hopefully have you all to have access to these slides, because I do think it'll be super beneficial for when you're talking to your project manager that's working on a construction site, when you're talking to your municipal official who wants to address embodied carbon but doesn't understand the best practices moving forward. And so there's so many innovative ways and deep dives here. And so I'm very excited to share that with all of you. Okay, so one of the things that was brought up was the Mass EC Embodied Carbon Reduction Challenge. And I know you all probably have been following this very closely. Bev Craig is an amazing friend and a total champion in this. And so, as you know, Mass EC and B Plus launched the first ever in the nation Embodied Carbon Reduction Challenge. And so this really brought on a whole new case study, innovative practices for people on projects within Massachusetts and buildings to address those upfront embodied carbon emissions. And so 16 teams submitted and they performed whole building life cycle assessments, also known as an assessment of the sum total of all building related emissions over a building's entire life. So I kind of imagine it like a nutritional label for carbon for a project. So it covers from cradle to barrel all of the emissions that are released, like the amount of sugar, the amount of carbs, et cetera, for each point of the project time. And so during this, they were graded on, so 11 were awarded of the 16, and they were graded on embodied carbon reduction, innovation, I can never say this word, the ability to replicate it, and cost effectiveness. And so overall, the 16 projects made an embodied carbon reduction of 2.5 metric tons of CO2, which is crazy to say because this was only 16 projects, which is equivalent to carbon sequestered in 413,377 tree seedlings grown for 10 years. Hard to imagine, but I think, talking about carbon reduction and seeing numbers like this, it is super, it's able to, when you're talking to a municipal official or a legislator, they like numbers. They want to know what is it actually, the cost effectiveness, the percent that carbon we're saving, and how much is it going to cost at the end of this if we do put this forward. They want to see how the practice actually works. And so I'm going to do my best to deep dive into the number one winner, which was the Jones Library. Again, I want to repeat that I'm not an architect, but here you can see, if I zoom, can you guys see that?
Yes.
Beautiful. So on the project team were some really amazing folks that really did a lot of work. I don't know how long this took, but the different practices that they did in order to meet their carbon reductions were building reuse, which is, again, something I'm going to touch on a little at the end here. Interior woodwork preservation, so really thinking more of using wood over steel, and again, building reuse around that as well. And then hybrid timber CLT structure. Mass timber is becoming a huge market and becoming way more attractive in the AEC community, and something here in Massachusetts that folks are really thinking about in ways to be innovative when they are using in their project. And so I have a lot of materials on mass timber that I'm happy to share that BSA has started before I was here. And I'm also now getting to work on a little bit more with the firms and members closely. Another way is through flexible and compact program design. So really having open spaces, so less structures within the building, and then fly ash and concrete. So low embodied carbon concrete was another way they were able to reduce their carbon emissions. Oops. Okay, and so let's see if I can zoom into this part. Beautiful. So here, let's see if I can do it again. Here you can see they avoided 814 metric tons of carbon upfront. And so they also provided a wonderful graph of kind of the entire embodied carbon life cycle and then the global warming potential of what was the baseline versus what was proposed through their work. And so looking at the interiors, the
Miranda,
enclosure, and the superstructure as well as the substructure. And so they were able to get to a 30% reduction, which is,
Miranda,
yep.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but it looks like the left margin is cropping again. I don't know if anybody sees
Can
that.
you see this?
Yeah, that's because you're blowing up the graphic, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
no
And that,
problem.
as long as I jumped in, that's 30% reduction in thank you, global warming potential, and that's just the embodied carbon, correct?
Yes.
Fantastic. One more question. Sorry. Do you know, is 30% a reasonable target? Was it exceptional? Any ideas?
I think when it comes to a challenge like this, it's a little bit exceptional. They were also the winners. I couldn't think from the top of my head what it was compared to the others. But I do think they did a lot of innovative practices, and so I think this is like a kind of a big deal when it comes to the percent they were able to save. All right, perfect. So I did my best there, pretending to be an architect on a project. Okay, so some technical tools I would want to share with all of you. So again, like I was saying, the Carbon Leadership Forum really does focus on embodied carbon policy. They're a national nonprofit that collects tools regarding embodied carbon and really just supporting folks at the policy level as well as the technical background for information. So this toolkit here, the Embodied Carbon Policy Toolkit, was actually recently updated this summer. And so it is kind of brand new, has a lot of more information. But the one thing I do really want to focus on is, yes, they have the policy fact sheets were super helpful, but here on the right, they have a policy tracking map. And so not only do they have proposed policy at both the city and the state level, but they have passed and failed policies. And so this is an area where I use very closely with the municipal cohort to kind of prove like what is feasible within your municipality, what was proposed, and then also like reaching out to the coalitions that were behind the folks that were supporting these policies. How did you get it to pass? How did you get this to move forward? It's all about collecting information and broadening your network outside of just Massachusetts, but the people that are focusing on this outside, and really just building the coalition, whether it passed or it failed. And so I think this really does make a huge difference, and legislators love to see this and this being referred to, mostly for the policies that have passed in other states. And so definitely something that I think you should take a look at because it's a lot of wonderful information. And it kind of tells you the type of policy it was, whether it was zoning, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's very interesting. And I'm so happy someone is doing all of this work. And another one I want to bring up is then the technical tools that I use very closely with the municipal cohort. So the Rocky Mountain Institute has the Embodied Carbon Policy Toolkit. It's very similar to the CLF, but this one has a lot of just basic framing conversations. And so I think it's super helpful for someone that's just getting introduced to what embodied carbon is and different ways to look at it. And so here on the screen, you'll see all of these different like subject lines. That's everything this toolkit has. And so from pledges, task force, and professional coalitions, like I was saying, that is super helpful as someone in my role to see, okay, how did these people pass these policies and who can I connect with? But really the policy and how-to guides is kind of what we're focusing on within the municipal cohort. And so I think connecting with your municipal official and making sure that they're moving forward on this work and that these tools exist is super important. Okay, so I want to kind of do a deep dive at the best I can on building reuse and construction. This is deconstruction. This is a topic that keeps coming up within my work, and I know many people have questions referring to this. And so building reuse is like also referred to like adaptive reuse or renovation or demolition. There's so many words that are thrown when we talk about this, but really it's just describes a process wherein the structure, the envelope, or other portions of an existing building are retained rather than the total demolition and construction of new building on the same site. And so usually, unfortunately, I don't think in Massachusetts we have a policy that says what percentage of the building is considered reuse versus demolition. And so I think that's something that we need to work on advocating for, is getting that percentage and understanding what it is the threshold that will allow us to address the largest amount of embodied carbon from the upfront. So that's something I'm working very closely with our members to identify at the architect level, at the engineer level, to what that percentage would be. And so on the other side, deconstruction is the process of just disassembling the building to allow for the salvage of the building materials to be reused. So a very safe, proper way to demolish a building, but taking out the materials for reuse. So I think this is also something, again, where we have to identify that percentage and making sure that, we are putting the best practices and incentives for folks in the AEC community to want to salvage these parts of the building in order to address embodied carbon, in order to get some tax incentives, the carrots and sticks to move forward here properly. But there's so many benefits and ways that we can advocate for reuse. And so the reduction of embodied carbon, of course, and also avoids materials ending up in landfills, which is a really large percentage if you think of all of the construction that we do here in Massachusetts, and then really contributes to investments in existing communities. So I know I've had conversations with some of you in the past. Your historic commission wants your town to not demolish this building. And so there's just historic and cultural significance. And so I think there's really a way to push that lever when advocating for building reuse and deconstruction rather than demolition. So I think this is definitely a conversation I want to have a little bit more of with all of you, and identifying ways, we can advocate for this moving forward. So what can we do now? So I know this was kind of a disappointing end for the legislative session. We had 3 bills within the Massachusetts legislature that addressed embodied carbon, and they were attached, well, potentially attached to the climate omnibus bill that unfortunately did not move forward this session. But I will say I am hearing word that we might open up again for a special formal session come this fall for them to address the eco dev bill. But I think this is also an opportunity for us to advocate for them to also address the omnibus climate bill. They have many priorities that they did not focus on. And the answers to that, I think, are not to our disadvantage, that we did not advocate hard enough, that we did not provide the resources and the information needed, but more the structure and the being of the Massachusetts legislature. And so I think there's a lot more we can do just outside of just advocating for climate, but also advocating for transparency within the Massachusetts legislature. But I think besides hopefully this new opportunity to advocate come fall in the special legislative formal session, but coming up to this next session, having conversations with coalition partners to make sure that, you know, embodied carbon is a priority. They are very focused. There's so many things to focus on right now, but, you know, maybe sneaking in an embodied carbon legislation or a bill as one of their priorities as well could really be a huge win, as well as sharing all the resources and tools with your legislators to kind of learn what embodied carbon is and why it's important to address it now. And then really also touch base with the past co-sponsors, the people that were our champions this past legislative session, and show them that you support them to refile, that there are these new tools and that there's this whole community behind them, is also super important. And then at the local level, sharing again these resources with your city council, your planning commissions, your building inspector, your historic commission, the folks that, you know, they could potentially address embodied carbon within their role as a municipal official. And then do you have a town meeting or an upcoming project, whether it's reconstruction or new construction? Is there something that are tools that you can share with these folks that are addressing this? Are you redrafting your climate action plan? Really being sure that you are the advocate for addressing embodied carbon emissions and making sure that that is top of mind for them in this work. And so I really do think there's so much we can do here collectively. And so I'm super grateful that I got to be here again and kind of share my hosh bagosh information that I've collected over the years. But again, thank you all so much. And I hope that was helpful in some fashion.
Thank you very much, Miranda. That was awesome. I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure many others did as well. Folks seem to have some questions in the chat, but I want to give Jerry an opportunity to chime in, and then we can maybe get into the questions in the chat. Jerry.
Jerry, you're muted.
Yep, I think I clicked to ask him to unmute, so he may have to click on the screen. There you go. We can hear you.
Yes,
we could hear you.
Yeah, can you? I can't. Oh, here we go. Yeah, now you get to see me too. You lucky people. Miranda, it's so great to hear of your continuing growth professionally and success. More power to you, and thank you for this presentation. Wow, that's a lot. And I'm thinking, having had the experience of trying to promote ideas in Peabody, and Peabody is a really tough sell for anything except ice cream. I'd love to see a one-pager with links to the information. Okay, I'd like to be able to grab the mayor in one of his few public appearances and say, you know, this is a complicated subject. I know you don't have the time, but can you pass this on to the people in the administration who were involved with a new school building or just building a new fire and police station? I don't know if any thought went into, you know, making that a sensible build. But there's always construction, and I look out my window, there's a 4-story building going up for a restaurant, and 30% of the carbon could be saved. Now, in your presentation, I'm trying to think, what could I say, what's in it for you as the city inspector or the city planner? It seems like the issues are, you know, how to design a building for a life cycle. I mean, that's beyond what most people think about. But we're in a finite planet, and we act as if we could continue to grow to an infinite, you know, everything is always going to get better and bigger, and the economy is continuing going to grow, and that's just not realistic. So there are many areas, just not just in buildings, where we have to recycle. And selling that, explaining that. So I think if you could help develop tools, because what you presented today is a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, no, and justifiably, all right. So you need to, I'm suggesting, find a way to open the door to make it easier for people like us to get people at least thinking about and maybe talking to you and the people in your organization with the architectural expertise to advise them. That's a lot, but I hope that's helpful. And thank you for what you're doing.
Of course, thank you. And I think, you know, you touch on like the role of an advocate, like what is the easy step or the conversation you can have, the framework when you're touching base with your city planner, with your building, the project manager of a building. What is it that you can say that is almost like this is attractive to them? And I think that's just the role of an advocate, understanding what that framework looks like. And embodied carbon is a hard subject to talk about because it's not fully understood yet. And so I think the three tiers that need to be had in those conversations is one is understanding what is the goal of this project. Is it they want to be cost effective? Are they doing sustainability? Are they focusing on sustainability? Or are they just trying to build as quick as possible? And so understanding, okay, what is the easiest step or what tool can I provide them for them to address embodied carbon? And I think second, like understanding that Massachusetts is a leader in this space. You know, we want our buildings to be sustainable. We want to address embodied carbon. We want to lead on addressing carbon emissions. And so really kind of adding fuel to the fire when you're having conversations and letting them know like other project teams are doing this and they're doing it well is really a great way that I've noticed. And really understanding that, you know, it's a conversation that needs to be had. And as an advocate, we need to understand that people come in with their own agendas, but what is it, an area we can meet in the middle? And I think really showing them that not only is this feasible, but it's successful is the way to move forward.
I see Sally's hand, but quickly, I want to just do two quick questions from the chat, and then we'll go to Sally if that's okay. So I see Margot asks if you would be able to share your contact information regarding tools and partnerships with activist groups. Reading has a zero carbon initiative and would love to get more information from Miranda and MCAM. Thank you. And then Jerry Frank from Dudley says, there's a lot of insulated glass that is reaching its end of life due to broken seals. Instead of throwing all the glass away, is there a way to save it by dismantling the panes, cleaning the inside, and then reassembling the glass with the new seal?
I've been working very closely with Mass DEP, and I know there's some salvage companies. I don't think we have many in Massachusetts, but Mass DEP recently put on a webinar regarding like window glass and different glass like salvage, and as well as different building reuse salvage. And they are the ones that should have contacts on folks that hopefully can come and, you know, reuse these materials. And so I'll be sure to collect that as well as I think of all of the information I want to share follow up.
Sally, please.
Okay, I had to unmute. Hi, Miranda. It's great to see you again.
Great to see you too.
So glad that you're doing your wonderful work and being able to use all the things that you build on the things build with low carbon, of course, on the things that you've learned through your work with MCAN. No, I can't remember it. Let's see. The last question, oh yeah, one point that was brought up in I think a couple of previous MCAN webinars on this topic was, I thought, a really powerful one, that we as advocates don't need to be experts, but we can advise if we can get people on board in our towns to include in their request for proposals that we want life cycle analysis, life cycle assessments, and low embodied carbon to be factored in, so that they're potentially hiring contractors who have that kind of experience, and architects and so forth. I thought that was a really good point. And also, a question is, I wonder if anybody's been doing cost analysis. I mean, that's one of the top things that always pops up as well. Does this cost more? You know, so is there any information, or is there data on that can be shared?
Yeah, so Mass EC, within their Mass EC and B Plus Embodied Carbon Reduction Challenge, they have cost also tied into like the full detail. I just showed you the fact sheet there, but cost effectiveness was also one of them. And also when it comes to deconstruction and reuse, there is a new tool that the EPA released that kind of does a cost analysis on reusing materials. So like a project team could go in and say this, and this versus demolition. And it kind of shows like a cost effectiveness, which is really exciting to see. So I'll be sure to include that as well.
You said that was EPA?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. Thanks, Miranda.
Of course.
James, please go ahead.
Hi, y'all. This is my first MCAN exposing me as a person. I'm also working on all of this as a day job over at 2050 Partners. We support California with their work, so I can bring some examples from other states over here if that would help. Related to Jerry's point, it would be interesting from the grassroots level to treat this new topic like a 10-gear transmission, and every person that you interact with at your local level, you can't start in 5th gear. They're going to get your gears are going to get stripped. They're going to be disappointed that they don't know what's going on. They may feel dumb, and which is a terrible thing to feel. No one wants to feel that way. And so it would be very helpful to plan ahead for an on-ramp of information that allows the individual you're focusing on to allow them to catch up to speed based on that. So even a big intense document that Miranda referenced, or that one screen, it's really a tough subject to get your head around, and it would be really helpful to have a collection of steps we can take our targeted individuals through, and maybe make it methodical and say, all right, we're at step 3 with this person. We're at step 4 here. Oh, we slipped back to step 3 because they really didn't get step 4. The idea is to make each individual that we feel is an important decision maker kind of characterize their up to speedness on this, and use a common set of tools to kind of up the ante every time we interact with them. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful way to frame that. And I think there's many toolkits that already do exist that do just that, whether it's like a webinar series or toolkits that are specifically for architects or for municipal staff. And so I think I'm happy to collect and share, but like you said, it's more of an onboarding process, like starting a new job. And I think really framing that conversation as a conversation instead of a hard request is really important.
Thank you. Ricky.
Hi, Miranda. So great to see you. I echo everything everybody else said. Lexington is we're building a new high school. We're working with MSBA. This high school is slated to be at the bottom, $600 million. And as you can imagine, the town is going, a little berserk. And we have an integrated building and design program that has been accepted by the select board and the school committee. It has lots of sustainability in it. We now have people trying to shear away at some of that, saying, do we need all of this? Is this overkill? So bringing up embodied carbon, there's 5 designs and 4 of them or 3 or 4 of them are demolition, rebuild, and there's one reno ad. And this is a money issue for the town. And I don't know if there are any tools out there that can show how we use it, because their cost for the reno ad is the same. So they say there is no cost savings. Of course, they're not factoring the life cycle cost savings of reusing materials. And how, there's already an architect chosen. Can I find out if this architect has experience with, is this some kind of underground research I can do to see whether they've ever done anything like that? And if you know of any school buildings, like all the ones around us are shiny, brand new school buildings, which of course people want here. So I'd love to see examples of a reuse concept within a major building of a school, for instance.
Yeah. I think schools is definitely that sticky point. I don't know many renovations of schools. I used to work very closely with Sarah from Unted K-12, and she's the best when it turns to those type of projects. But for the architect information, you should be more than, like, without question, be able to look within their website to see what they have when it comes to sustainability practices, what they've done in the past, and what their commitments are. They are suggested to do commitments when it comes to sustainability and climate. But I think when it comes to, you're saying that you have 4 projects being produced, and they're going to pick like the best one, having a request of an ask when it comes to embodied carbon, the first is for them just to do an assessment. It's very easy. It's not asking them to reduce carbon right away, but it's for them to just understand the amount of carbon that's going into the building, the construction or deconstruction. And then through that, having conversations like, this area here, there's a huge influx of carbon. This is an innovative way to address that. And, through like the BE Plus and Mass EC Challenge, you can see the cost effectiveness. How much more expensive was it to use this innovative way, or is there no cost change? And so I think being able to supply information like that, first having that first initial step being like assessment, and then being like, okay, now that we did this, that, kind of like we were having the conversation before. But when it comes to cost analysis, there's not a lot of tools there yet, but I do think there's ways to frame that conversation through the toolkits. Hopefully I will be able to provide very soon. And I think having that conversation when it comes to schools and understanding, that's a municipal upfront cost. And so cost is going to be the number one. And so I think having innovative ways to address that is going to be critical. But I will let you know that I work closely with Mark still in the RMI. And so we've been having this conversation and we're putting together some resources.
Oh, great. And the assessment tool, that's something that every I should assume an big architectural firm has the ability to access tools on assessment. Okay, thanks. Thank you, Miranda.
Of course.
Fred, please.
Okay, thanks. So this is a great conversation. And as I said before, this is a continuation of conversations we've been having this year. I just want to do a couple of things here. And I know there's more questions, so I'll try to make this quick. But remember at the beginning, we were asking people to identify yourselves, change 3 dots to put your town or affiliation. And that's going to come in handy in the question I'm about to ask. So if you haven't done that yet and you still can't, please do. Please identify yourself, because what I'd like to ask is for just a show of hands electronically. And I apologize for some people have a question. Kate, we're not going to forget that your hand is up for the question. But otherwise, if you could use the reactions and put your hand up if you are looking on your horizon, if you have something in the pipeline or on the horizon in your municipality, in your community, that's new construction coming in your community, where obviously embodied carbon should be attended to. If you have a project coming up in your community, please raise your hand, and I think the details in each town will be of interest, but I hope people are learning through this process that nobody has to suffer alone or start from scratch. And what I want to point out is just an observation that what we are seeing here is a quick movement from what might have been called cutting edge, leading edge, bleeding edge, wasn't ever bleeding edge, but anyway, cutting edge to mainstream. It doesn't happen overnight, but it doesn't take forever. And in this case, I'm saying it's taking about 2 years, and we're about 1 year plus into the process. So that is what we're seeing here. And you know, you are here. You are seeing this live and in person. It will be in the history books soon. You are part of the process. Okay. So now thanks for that, answering that question. I am seeing hands up from I'm seeing 11 or so. And if you could please identify, and you can put it into chat, what town it is and what the project is, and hopefully we will be able to address some details in upcoming webinars. And if you have such ideas along those lines, please let us know. Okay, thanks for that. Thanks for raising your hands, and we'll get back to the remaining questions. Tristan.
Kate.
Hi, great to see you, Miranda. Thank you so much for that. I am curious. So I think most of us know the ADU, accessory dwelling unit law, just passed. Hopefully, lots of ADUs will be built. That's lots of new construction. It seems to me, I don't have data, but it seems to me that modular building is much less carbon intensive than stick building. And ADUs are like perfect for modular building. So I'm wondering if, Miranda, you have facts and figures on that we can share, or if we can think about, putting a campaign together, like, oh, you're doing an ADU, like town by town. I'm not talking statewide. Like, I'd love to be able to say in Andover, hey, for those of you thinking about doing ADUs, here's 3 modular builders. They're phenomenal. They're cool on architecture, and they reduce your carbon impact.
I definitely think that is a wonderful idea, mostly since this law just recently passed. There's a lot of excitement and momentum around it. And so I think you're right. This is definitely something that I can bring back to my team and kind of put in a request like, hey, any architect that's currently working on ADU, can you also do like a life cycle assessment to make sure what the carbon reduction is? And so we can start sharing that information widely. That's definitely something I can do on my end, and I think would be super critical to share. So I think that's a great idea. Yeah.
Thanks, Miranda.
Of course.
You're the best.
I know we have about 8 minutes left in the official portion of this conversation, so we can continue to move through questions, but fellow MCAN board members, feel free to check me on when we need to transition. Margot, might your hand be up for a question? If so, feel free to jump in.
And Margot, you're muted.
Hi, sorry about that. I'm actually looking at some of these, the Lexington High School building project that was sent out in the chat, and a couple of the other things while I'm listening. And I just wanted to clarify in terms of my question, I'm not looking for help specifically in Reading. I was just more or less, looking. And so that's why I jumped over to some of the building projects to see how people are getting involved, because I think they've started our project in Reading, but so I'm just kind of getting involved in it, and I'm gonna have to find out where they are with it, I guess, at this point. But thank you, I'm done.
No worries, thank you. Sally, so you put your hand down. Tina, is your hand still up from earlier, or did you have a question?
I wanted to. I apologize. I got onto the meeting late, so I missed the first part of it. But just in terms of the Lexington project, I do believe that they have done an analysis of the building, and I think it's really unsatisfactory. There is a big push for a new build, but I know that the school was built in the brutalist architecture style. It's really heavy on steel and concrete. It's a massively solid building. So that's why we have been pushing for a renovation versus a tear down. And I know that in the UK, they are much more aware of the embodied carbon issue and the advantages of renovation versus tear down, and have made big commitments to over new builds to renovate. And someone that I have been working with, she presented at the meeting last night. There was a school a school rebuild committee meeting last night, and she had brought up the fact that, you know, at the Paris Olympics, they have chosen to not build big buildings like at the Beijing Olympics, and that they'd renovated a lot of stuff that they had and used the buildings that they already had, that it made a lot more sense. And I just feel like every time there's an opportunity to speak at one of these meetings, even when things like this are stated, it is a bit of a brick wall. And there's a lot of pushback on that. And I'm just wondering, well, I guess I'm just trying to look for more answers as to how else we can impress on them the importance of doing this. As Ricky stated before, they are telling us it will cost the same amount. But I was with the group that toured some of the schools. They had set up an opportunity for us to tour some of the schools that were being put up locally, Waltham and Somerville and Arlington. And I know that when we walked through Waltham, it wasn't done yet, and they had just finished laying all the steel, and they had just finished pouring all the concrete, and then they were starting to put all the interiors together. And I'm thinking there has to be a cost advantage because that would be the point at which we would be starting the school in Lexington, right? You know, you take all the interiors out, you're renovating it, and then you're starting at that point. It's just a matter of how do you get people to understand that that is the point at which we would start the building. As opposed to, you know, knocking it down, disposing of it, then preparing the site, preparing the ground, putting the foundations in, laying the steel, pouring the concrete. Yeah, I just don't have the expertise, but I have done this website, and if anyone has any expertise on how I could plump that up a little bit, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a difficult conversation. I will definitely look at this website and offer some of my advice on ways to, you know, plump this website up and have those conversations. And I think embodied carbon, again, is just one of those topics that people don't have a full understanding on, and don't want to move forward on because it's not really, we're in the midst of making it marketable, I guess is the way to say it. But I think identifying those easy wins within those projects, whether that is using low embodied carbon concrete or doing an assessment or some reuse versus a full demolition, seeing what it is that they might be like, oh, actually, that is something that we can move forward on. Giving them all of those options and opportunities and ways to address embodied carbon is probably the best way to move forward, mostly since you're saying that they already did an analysis, and so they probably have, their project put together in some sort of fashion in their mind. But giving them easy, innovative ways to move forward to address embodied carbon is probably what they're looking for, if they're looking for anything at all. And as you were saying, that those conversations have been hard.
Thank you, Miranda. I do have a bunch of examples on the website. I've listed like the Smith campus, the at Harvard, and Wellesley and Syracuse. They've all done projects with the renovation and reuse. So Andover, yes. Yeah, Andover, the SMMA is they do a lot of local stuff, and they have done a couple of renovations, but I think that the pressure from within is too much. But thank you, Miranda. Thanks.
Of course.
I know we're right at 10 o'clock, and I see James has his hand up in a question. I'm going to be slightly selfish, if that's okay, because I have to hop and I have a quick question, and then I'll allow perhaps Fred and Phil to moderate for James' question and any subsequent conversation. But it was good to see you all and nice to meet you. My question is, might you have been following the City of Boston zoning climate proposal that was recently rejected? And if so, do you have any general thoughts?
That was extremely
Excuse me,
disappointing.
this is covered in this morning's Boston Globe. This is
I've yet to read it, but what a disappointment. And I think that was one of those moments where that 11th hour developers came in and totally provided wrong facts, wrong information, and kind of got that to not move forward, which is a huge disappointment for all of the wonderful experts that have been working on this for almost 30 years, I want to say, which is crazy to think. And so I think moving forward now, I think it's again a larger issue where it's more the transparency and the stature of the commission than it is the work and the actual facts. But I know there's possibly some conversations within the Wu administration that we can start. Maybe bringing this back up, the ways we can advocate. So I will be sure to bring that back up. But this summer has been quite disappointing. But hopefully we can continue working on this.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna hop off. James, I don't know if you still had a question, but thanks everybody.
I don't want to be that guy that keeps a meeting going on, so I'll chill.
Yeah, this is the end of the hour, so if people needed to drop off, that's fine. I can stick around for 15 minutes, and please go ahead, James.
Phil, do you want to remind folks that you will be sending around notes and such?
Yes, I'll be circulating Miranda's slides, the recording, the chat, so that we can keep this this discussion going and kind of facilitate cross pollination. And in the chat, I included a link where people can go to sign up to be notified of upcoming MCAN presentations, as well as a link to where they would donate. But again, thank you very much for everyone's attendance, and I will pass the baton to James.
Okay. Nice to meet everybody. It's good to see a bunch of people that think alike. We all might be frustrated in similar ways too, but we can maybe take our shots. You guys have a website, and you have an embodied carbon page, which is super cool. Thank you for building that. At the end of that, it does call out at least Newton that has an embodied carbon whole building life cycle analysis requirement for their big projects. And I was wondering if this group could entice someone from Newton with all their arrows in their back to come talk to you all about how they got it to work in Newton, and maybe we could create create the best practices out of their success, and maybe help them, soak them for their details, and then create a little how to do it moving forward thing.
Sounds like this ties in with the 30-person group that you've been working with, Miranda.
Yeah, the
Doing
wonderful
wonderful.
expert behind that was Mark Webster. He's a structural engineer. He's also works within the city council with Newton, and he actually just finished like a 5-building case study project. And I know that he's looking to do presentations, and so I'm happy to connect the MCAN team with him. He's a champion in this, and there's also many communities that are moving forward and putting life cycle analysis within their policies. I know Somerville, Cambridge, Boston was hopefully going to be
Good.
one.
Okay.
And so,
Well, I guess my extended point would be that the whole picture is a big thing. So if you have a really juicy looking old building that you want to save and not destroy,
Mhm.
If you look at the whole building life cycle, it may be really, really hard for that building to be cost effectively updated for good operational carbon behavior. And so if you take a look at the whole building, you can then kind of get your bubbles burst, but actually do it methodically to say it's actually better for the project if we don't reuse this piece. We'll cry inside, but the idea is this is a 50-year building moving forward, and if it's going to be kind of stinky related to operational carbon, that's a big trade-off. So the whole question is the right one to ask when we can. Thank you.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you. I unfortunately do have a meeting to hop to. I'm 5 minutes late, but I do want to say a huge, huge thank you to all of you for having me, and I look forward to continuing having this conversation. There's nothing like the fuel that you all give me when it comes to the advocacy and the just expertise that you already have. It makes me feel good that we're all working on this together. So thank you again for having me. I love all of you. Good luck, and I will definitely be in contact.
Thank
Thank you,
you, Miranda.
Thank you, Miranda.
Thanks, Miranda.
Thanks
Great
for
to
all
see
your
you.
work and for keeping this field moving along. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Nice to meet everyone.
Good to see everybody. What a
Good to see
great network.
Thank you very much, MCAN.